You're watching The World with me, Charles Aniagolu. Now, the US Secretary of State says it will soon be clear whether Russia is serious about peace in Ukraine, and Washington will judge Moscow by its actions, not its words. Marco Rubio made the remarks at a NATO foreign ministers summit in Brussels amid growing disquiet in Ukraine and among European leaders about what they view as delaying tactics by President Putin. Earlier, as alarm and confusion deepened in the EU, NATO member states sought reassurance about Washington's commitment to the alliance as they grapple with the big change in America's focus.
Then we have seen in the past that you will have discussions between members of the alliance on other issues than defense, which will not immediately impact the capability and the ability of allies to deliver on the common defense and security. So I think these two are really separate, and we should keep them separate and should not get them to interfere in our discussions.
But ultimately, the markets, as long as they know what the rules are going to be moving forward, and as long as that's set and you can sustain where you're going to be, the markets will adjust. Businesses around the world, including in trade and global trade, they just need to know what the rules are. Once they know what the rules are, they will adjust to those rules. So I don't think it's fair to say economies are crashing. Markets are crashing because markets are based on the stock value of companies who today are embedded in modes of production that are bad for the United States.
That's Marco Rubio there, and he's raising a very interesting point, which we're going to bring up later in the chat that is coming up. And let's go straight away to that chat now, because for his assessment, I'm joined now on the line from London by the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Great to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. So, as we mentioned in the intro, let's start with NATO member countries seeking reassurances from the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio about America's commitment to the alliance. Have they been reassured?
I doubt it, because he said nothing much to reassure them. The fact of the matter is the USA doesn't view NATO as being all that important, all important as it was before. And this comes over in actually what he stated. And therefore, there is no reassurance. What is reassuring for them is that he came at all, that the conference was held. And to that extent, yes, a little bit of reassurance, if you like.
Indeed. And of course, Mr. Rubio insisting on an unprecedented increase of up to 5% in defense spending by NATO allies. I mean, how did that go down?
Well, very badly, because to be quite honest, 5% is a very, very big amount. Poland's paying it right now, but other nations are unenthusiastic, to say the least, and have certainly been nowhere near 5%. To be honest, 3% is already a fair commitment for most of them. And therefore, this 5% is actually, if you like, a type of threat there, because what he's really saying is, unless you pay your way, and we reckon it's 5%, America is not going to be supporting you. That is the hidden threat behind all this. And therefore, from that point of view, he's laying out what America wants, and this is not what Europe wants to hear.
Meanwhile, of course, Dr. Laskiewicz, Poland has warned that Russia is running out of time to show that it is serious about peace talks with Ukraine. The Polish foreign minister said the US was giving Russia the chance to end the war whilst saving face, and that there would be consequences if President Putin didn't engage seriously with Donald Trump's peace efforts. I mean, what's your reading of that?
Well, to be quite honest, Poland has been, for a long time, since the start of the war, committed to stopping Russia. But then that's true for the past 1,000 years of Polish history. Although there have been periods, of course, either when Poland's been conquered, which the Poles don't much like, or when the Poles actually have been working to some degree with Russia, as happened over Smolensk air crash. However, on the whole, they don't like it, they don't want it, and therefore Radosław Sikorski is simply playing the role of saying Russia should stop, should obey, and of course President Putin is just not interested. The real question is, what will America do and this is the game that Russia's playing of chicken, what will America do if Russia does drag her feet? And this is the interesting question. And therefore, this conference is, if you like, irrelevant from that point of view, because the key decisions are made in Washington, not by NATO.
Indeed, although the Polish foreign minister did say, and you're quite right that, I mean, it's not his to make that decision, but he did say that there would be consequences if President Putin didn't engage seriously with Donald Trump's peace efforts. But in effect, the warning is that if Mr. Putin doesn't take the chance being offered by Mr. Trump, then the gloves might come off. Does that go against the prevailing perception that President Trump appears to have ended Russia's isolation and is focusing almost entirely on pressuring Ukraine to do a deal?
Actually, they're by no means mutually contradictory, what you stated there. First and foremost, it is true he's ended the isolation. It is true he wants to work with Russia. And it's true he's pressurizing Ukraine, partly for his own ends, of course, because low mineral prices are what the American economy needs, especially now there's a trade war. But at the same time, he has hinted over and over that he's prepared to go against Russia if Russia does not want to sign a ceasefire. So therefore, right now we're in the stage where he is offering Russia. We've yet to see, Russia's interested, but how far Russia wants to go and on what terms is unclear. And partly it's unclear because America herself is unclear. Please remember, President Donald Trump, for example, actually questioned President Zelensky's legal right to represent Ukraine. And when a few weeks later, just recently, of course, the president of Russia, Putin, suddenly says, we question President Zelensky's bona fides, and then suddenly Trump doesn't like it. In that sense, it is quite hard to be certain quite what America wants, and this is adding to the problems.
So, I mean, in that regard, the meeting that the Brits and the French have been holding in Ukraine to discuss the possibility of a peacekeeping force going from allied countries in the event of a possible ceasefire, I mean, that's, pretty much null and void, really.
It's null and void twice over because, first of all, it's the very thing that Russia doesn't want. And it's actually a reason why Russia's dragging its feet. Secondly, it's null and void because unless any peace treaty is signed or ceasefire or anything, it's not going to happen. And therefore, it is irrelevant. It actually is the very thing that America complains about, that Europe's not prepared to do anything. After peace is signed and it sends a force, great. But what about right now? I mean, that's what America's saying, in effect.
I'm just going beyond defense, Russia and Ukraine, even though obviously that NATO summit was about defense. I mean, President Trump's decision to impose a 20% tariff on goods from the EU featured heavily at that meeting, didn't it?
Yes. The point about these tariffs is that America can't really afford to run a deficit all the time. And Donald Trump, underneath all the bluster, underneath all these very, very aggressive points, is actually doing nothing more than trying to cut the trade deficit and also reduce his government deficit, incidentally, via Elon Musk. And so what is happening here, there's a great deal of fuss, but actually what Rubio said about the trade, that businesses will adapt to it, that to a degree is true. And that is precisely what Donald Trump wants. He actually wants them to invest in America because of these trade barriers. So actually, nothing is happening there that Donald Trump does not want. And in terms of NATO and EU, well, he's made it quite clear he's not all that interested in NATO for the reasons we discussed just a few seconds ago. It actually isn't doing anything, not anything much anyway. It all hinges on America, the support for Ukraine. America, for example, spends far more on its defense than the next 10 nations in line, some of which are European. So Europe really is not in the same league. And in that sense, the whole NATO conference is not of primary importance. And the trade war actually is playing into his hands.
Very interesting as always, and thank you ever so much. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst. He was talking to me on the line there from London. And as you heard from Dr. Laskiewicz there in the course of that discussion I just had with him, military chiefs from Britain and France are in Ukraine to discuss the possible deployment of troops from allied countries in the event of any potential ceasefire. Britain and France have been spearheading preparations for such security guarantees, coordinating with a number of other European and non-European allies. But Russia categorically opposes the idea of stationing any forces from NATO countries in Ukraine.